Hey, hello, felt like you're watching Project 307 and this is my RB26. There's many like it, but this one is mine.
Biggie, 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 can't you see? Sometimes your words just hypnotize me, and I just love your flashy ways. Guess that's why
My RB26 is missing a very important component. This 6-boost turbo manifold. This is a 6-boost twin scroll manifold. The height of the manifold is the collector system that's meant to give faster spool up and more low down power. The RB26 engine is out of my competition drift car, which the idea of quicker spool up is a great advantage, making the car easier to drive. The easier it is to keep the car on boost, the easier I'm hoping it is to drift and compete in the car. So, being the twin scroll manifold, you can see there's twin wastegate flanges, which you have to weld on yourself based on what wastegate you're running. These are twin 38mm Turbo Smart flanges, so you need to be friends with a good welder or know somebody that welds TIG for you. I will if I like. Do you fancy doing some more welding for me? What do you mean you're on holiday? So this leads me to the reason why the manifold's off the engine in the first place. When the car was last in the dyno, we found that there was a manifold leak, and in closer inspection to the old exhaust gasket, you can find that there's a little leak at the back end of the manifold. For whatever reason, the manifold's been warped in some way. I don't know if it's through heat or not being correctly tightened up, or for whatever reason it was about 1.5mm out. So a good check to do with your manifold when you get new before you fit it to the car is to run a straight edge across the sealing face. Make sure that it's flat and square. I've had this one skimmed. I had about 1.5mm skimmed off it, so it's definitely flat and true. The T3 flange on the turbo mount I've had skimmed flat as well, because I'm going to use a gasketless seal to seal between the turbo compressor housing and the manifold. For the turbo mounting flange, I've decided to go for a T3 flange, which I think is more than big enough for the power I'm trying to get out of the engine. I'm looking for about 550 to 600 horsepower, and it's fine for what I need. And the smaller the flange gives better spool up anyway. I've been told that the nitrogen purge on the welding the manifolds isn't that great. It's just hearsay, it's just what I've been told, so I recommend before you fit the manifold to hone out the inside of the tubes and make sure there's not any weld spatter. If that heats up, then goes through your compressor housing, then you have to get your turbo rebuilt, which is not great. On this turbo setup, I'm running twin 38mm Turbo Smart wastegates with external screamer pipes. The vacuum hoses I've had to do with braided hose because the heat was always melting them, and I found this has been the most reliable way of running the vacuum pipes I've had. This is a turbo I'm running with this setup, which is a Owen Developments HTA modified turbo. It's a pretty mega turbo, and not just because it's blue, but it spools up really well and it makes good power. It's a modified Garrett GT35 82, and at this moment this compressor housing is a 0.63 single scroll housing, but this is my new compressor housing that I'm going to be fitting when I put the turbo back on. Now this is a 0.61 twin scroll compressor housing for that GT35. And hopefully it's going to give them a little bit more power, and hopefully it's going to take the spool up down to about 3000. That's what I'm hoping, fingers crossed.
Hey Stuart, you idiot, you messed up, man. The whole time you're talking about the turbo, you got it all back to front. You're calling the turbine housing the compressor housing. The whole thing looks so unprofessional. Get it sorted out.
Another thing while I'm on the subject of turbos, I had issues of bursting the 90-degree hose going onto the turbo, just the location of the manifold. So what I had was an aluminium 90 tigged on to the end of the turbo, and it's made a big difference. It's made it a lot more reliable. I'd recommend it to anybody that's got a turbo that's really close to a manifold. So the final piece of the puzzle are these lovely new shiny HKS exhaust manifold gaskets, which should hopefully keep all the exhaust gases in the exhaust system rather than leaking out and not helping with spool up in any sort of way. So I suppose through the power of TV we can now cut to the finished product, which is a mounted manifold and turbo and wastegate and there. So here we have the almost finished article, manifold with new turbo mounted on it. Now I know what you've been thinking. Stuart, you've been in the house watching IDC and live stream, and you'd be right, but we got this done as well. So you'll notice it's all not completely finished because, like all Project 307 things, we run into a problem, and that was the downpipe doesn't fit. So I'm going to have to make a phone call to Owen Developments and get a new flange for it and get that weld done. So that means a phone call to my trusty welder. So thanks very much for watching. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments. I'll be happy to try and answer as quick as I can. If you want to know more about Project 307, check out some of my other videos. Hit the subscribe button for more content. And also we're on Facebook. Check us out on Project 307 on Facebook. Thanks for watching. Yeah, so really I'm like a Scottish Monkey London, just not so good looking and not so talented and not so funny really. So professional.
Really?
I'm gonna be the next fucking, I'm like a...
How they shoot big men?
The turbo... Shh! Sky! Shh! You're good. You finished? Is that you finished now?